I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. At first, it didn't fully register. You know that moment when you're half asleep, and your brain tries to convince you that whatever you're hearing is just part of a dream? That's exactly what this felt like. A distant noise. Faint but wrong. Out of place. I shifted slightly in bed, pulling the blanket closer, hoping it would fade. But it didn't. It got louder. Sharper. More aggressive. And then it hit me. Chainsaws. My eyes snapped open instantly. No hesitation. No confusion anymore. Just clarity. And a sudden, heavy feeling in my chest. I stayed still for a second, staring at the ceiling, listening carefully. There it was again. That harsh, grinding sound of metal tearing through wood. Not far away. Not somewhere in the distance. Close. Too close. And that didn't make any sense. Because I don't have neighbors like that. Not close enough for this. Not loud enough to sound like they're standing right outside my house. I live on private land. 15 acres. Open space. Quiet. Isolated. The kind of place where mornings are supposed to start with birds, wind through the trees, maybe the distant rustle of leaves. Not this. Not chainsaws. Not chaos. So why was I hearing it right outside? That's when I sat up. Fully awake now. Heart starting to beat faster. Not out of panic, but out of instinct. Something wasn't right. And I needed to see it for myself. I swung my legs off the bed and stood up quickly, not even bothering to grab a jacket or shoes. I moved straight toward the window. Each step feeling heavier than the last, like some part of me already knew what I was about to see, and didn't want to see it. But I kept going. Because I had to. I reached the window, placed my hand against the frame, and looked out. And in that exact moment, my stomach dropped. There were 3 men. Not near the road. Not at the edge of the property. On my land. Standing right there among my trees. And they weren't inspecting anything. They weren't measuring. They weren't even looking around. They were cutting. Actively cutting down my trees. One of them had a chainsaw pressed deep into the trunk of a large oak, the blade chewing through it like it was nothing. Another stood nearby, watching the angle, ready for the fall. And the third was dragging branches aside like this was routine work. Like they had every right to be there. Like this was planned. Controlled. Authorized. But it wasn't. Not by me. And that's when it got worse. Because then, I saw her. Standing near the dirt access road. Perfectly still. Watching everything. Arms crossed. Posture straight. Composed. Like she was supervising a project she had personally approved. That expression on her face. Calm. Certain. Satisfied. Karen. The HOA president from Pine Ridge Estates. And in that moment, everything inside me went from confusion to clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't someone accidentally crossing a boundary. This wasn't miscommunication. This was intentional. Planned. Executed. And I was the target. I didn't think twice. Didn't grab my phone. Didn't put on shoes. Didn't even stop to process it fully. I just moved. Fast. Out the door and straight toward them. My heart was pounding now, but not from fear. From disbelief. From anger. From the sheer audacity of what I was looking at. Hey, stop. My voice cut through the air, loud enough to break through even the noise of the chainsaw. The man holding it hesitated. The sound stuttered, then slowed. Another worker looked over his shoulder. Confusion spread across their faces almost instantly. Because now they were realizing something important. The owner was here. And he wasn't happy. The chainsaw powered down completely. Silence rushed in thick and heavy. But Karen? She didn't move. Not even a step. Not even a slight shift in posture. She just stood there, watching me approach. Unbothered. Unimpressed. Like this was all expected. Like she had already prepared for this moment. And then, she smiled. That same tight, controlled smile I had seen before. The kind that never reaches the eyes. You're finally awake, she said. And just like that, everything made sense. This wasn't just about the trees. She knew I was here. She knew I would come out. And she had already decided how this would go. What is this? I demanded, stepping closer. Why are they on my land? The workers stepped back slightly, giving space between us. But Karen? She stepped forward. Calm. Measured. Like she was about to explain a minor inconvenience, not justify trespassing. She adjusted her stance slightly. Almost like she was preparing for a formal conversation. These trees are being removed, she said, her voice steady, due to multiple violations reported by Pine Ridge residents. For a second, I just stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. And then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so completely absurd my brain needed a release. You're joking, right? I said. This isn't HOA land. Her smile shifted just slightly. Not gone. Just tighter. It affects HOA property, she replied. No, I said firmly. It doesn't. There was a pause. A long one. The kind where everything hangs in the air. The workers looked between us again. One of them shifted his weight awkwardly. Another glanced down at the chainsaw like he wasn't sure if he should even be holding it anymore. Because now, this wasn't just a job. This was a problem. And then Karen said it. The line that made everything clear. We gave you multiple notices, she said. You chose to ignore them. And that's when it clicked. All of it. The letters. The warnings. The tone. The persistence. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't about trees. This wasn't about community concerns. This was about control. It always had been. A few months earlier, I bought this land for one simple reason. Freedom. 15 acres of open space. No restrictions. No approvals. No one telling me what I could build, what I could plant, what I could remove. Just my land. My rules. And right next to it, Pine Ridge Estates. An HOA neighborhood that looked perfect on the surface. Clean streets. Uniform houses. Perfectly maintained lawns. But underneath that, rules. Endless rules. Rules about fence height. Rules about grass length. Rules about paint colors. Rules about what kind of mailbox you could have. Rules about things that shouldn't even matter. And I want to know part of it. That's why I made sure, before signing anything, that my land was completely outside their jurisdiction. I had it surveyed, verified, documented, triple-checked. There was no overlap, no shared control, no confusion, just a clear, defined boundary line. And that boundary ran exactly along the trees she was now cutting down. The first time Karen showed up, I already knew this might become a problem. She didn't knock, didn't call, didn't ask permission. She just walked onto my property like she belonged there, approached me directly, and pointed at the trees. Those are a problem, she said immediately. No introduction, no context, just a complaint. I remember thinking, here we go? How? I asked. They blocked the view for several homes, she said. Damage already done. Stop everything, I said again. Louder this time. More direct. The workers didn't hesitate. They stepped back immediately. Because now it was clear. This wasn't normal. This wasn't approved. This wasn't safe for them either. But Karen? She stepped forward again, trying to regain control. You don't have the authority to do that, she said. I looked straight at her. Come now. Certain. And you don't have the authority to be here. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. And then, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I'm calling a surveyor. She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. Like this was an inconvenience. Like facts didn't matter. Go ahead, she said. But this time, I wasn't asked. The chainsaws were silent now. But the silence didn't bring relief. It brought tension. The kind of tension that fills the air so completely, it almost feels heavy to breathe. Moments earlier, the sound of cutting would have taken over everything. Now, there was nothing. No movement. No noise. Just stillness. And in that stillness, every second felt longer than it should. Karen stood exactly where she had been. Arms still crossed. Posture still straight. Expression still controlled. At least on the surface. But when you looked closer, there it was. A shift. Small. Almost unnoticeable. But real. That tiny crack in her confidence. That flicker of uncertainty she couldn't fully hide. Because deep down, she knew. If I was right, if those trees really were on my land, then everything she had just done, sending workers here, authorizing them to cut, acting like she had control, it wouldn't just be wrong. It would be serious. And she knew it. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because at this point, this wasn't about arguing. It wasn't about opinions. It wasn't about who sounded more confident. It was about one thing. Proof. The surveyor I called wasn't random. I didn't just search for someone nearby. I didn't pick a name off a list. No. This was the same man who had walked this land months ago. The same one who had measured every inch of it. The same one who had marked the boundaries when I bought it. He knew this property better than anyone else. Which meant one thing. There would be no guessing. No assumptions. No, it might be. No, it could be. Just facts. Clear. Precise. Undeniable facts. When I called him earlier, I didn't waste time explaining everything. I just told him what was happening. They're cutting trees on my property. I said, I need you to confirm the boundary. There was a short pause on the line. Not hesitation. Just focus. Then he said, "I'll be there as soon as I can." And that was all I needed to hear. But those 2 hours waiting, they didn't feel like 2 hours. They felt longer than the entire morning. Longer than the moment I woke up. Longer than the confrontation. Because now, everything was on hold. Karen didn't leave. That was the surprising part. She could have walked away. She could have told the workers to pack up and come back later. She could have avoided the situation entirely. But she didn't. She stayed. Right there. Watching. Waiting. Like she still believed the outcome would somehow go in her favor. Like confidence alone could change reality. Every now and then, she would speak. Not directly to me, but just loud enough to be heard. "This will just confirm what we already know." Or, "You're wasting everyone's time." Or, "We've dealt with situations like this before." Each comment carefully placed. Like she was trying to maintain control of the narrative. Trying to remind everyone, especially herself, that she was still in charge. But I didn't respond. Not once. Because I understood something important in that moment. Arguing wouldn't help. Explaining wouldn't help. Even proving her wrong verbally wouldn't matter. Because people like her don't back down from words. They back down from evidence. So I stayed quiet. Watched. Waited. And let the tension build. The workers kept their distance. You could tell they were uncomfortable now. The energy had shifted. What started as a routine job now felt like something they shouldn't be part of. One of them leaned against the truck. Another kept glancing at Karen, like he was waiting for instructions. But none came. Because for the first time, Karen didn't have control of the situation anymore. She just hadn't accepted it yet. And then, finally, the moment arrived. A white truck appeared at the end of the dirt road, slowly making its way toward us. And just like that, everything changed. You could feel it. In the air. In the silence. In the way everyone suddenly stood a little straighter. Because this wasn't opinion anymore. This was verification. The truck came to a stop. 2 men stepped out. Calm. Professional. Focused. No urgency. No emotion. Just purpose. They didn't look at Karen. Didn't acknowledge the workers. Didn't react to the tension. Because none of that mattered to them. They were here for one thing. The truth. The lead surveyor walked over to me. "Show us where the issue is," he said. Simple. Direct. No assumptions. I nodded and turned toward the tree line. "They started cutting right here," I said, pointing to the partially cut trunk. He followed my hand, already scanning the area, taking in the surroundings, the layout, the terrain, the markers, everything. "All right," he said. "Let's take a look." And just like that, they got to work. If you've never seen a proper land survey happen, it's not quick, it's not casual, and it's definitely not something you can rush. It's methodical, precise. Every step has a purpose. Every measurement matters. They unloaded their equipment carefully, set up their instruments, adjusted levels, checked alignment, then started measuring angles, distances, coordinates, cross-referencing everything with original data. No guessing, no shortcuts, just accuracy. And the entire time, no one spoke. Karen stood there, watching, waiting, arms still crossed, but tighter now. Her confidence wasn't gone, but it was fading, slowly, because deep down, she knew something was coming. She just didn't know if she was ready to hear it. The workers stayed quiet, completely still now, like they didn't want to interfere with whatever was unfolding. Because now, this wasn't their job anymore. This was something else. Time stretched. Minutes felt longer. Every second pulling the tension tighter. And then, after looked at his notes, checked the equipment one last time, and started walking back toward us. And I could tell immediately, before he even said a word. He already knew. He stopped a few feet away, looked at me briefly, then turned his attention to Karen. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "this tree line is entirely within his property." The words landed. Clear. Simple. Final. Karen blinked. Just once. But it was enough to show it hit her. "That's not correct," she said. No pause. No hesitation. Just immediate rejection. The surveyor didn't react emotionally. Didn't argue. Didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "It is correct. We verified it using original boundary data." And just like that, everything shifted. Karen's posture changed. Not dramatically, but enough. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Her stance adjusted. Her confidence cracked. "No," she said again. "That land is maintained by the HOA." And that's when the surveyor delivered the line that ended everything. Maintenance does not equal ownership. Silence. Not the quiet from before. Not the waiting silence. This was different. This was final. He pointed toward a marker in the ground. Your boundary ends there, he said. About 20 feet before these trees. Karen followed his hand, her eyes tracing the line, processing, calculating, trying to find something, anything, that would change the outcome. But there was nothing, because facts don't bend. For the first time since this started, she didn't have a response. The workers looked at each other. One of them slowly reached down and turned off the last running chainsaw. The sound faded out completely. Another stepped back, creating distance. Because now, they understood. I took a step forward. Calm, controlled, certain. So let me get this straight, I said. You ordered them to cut trees on land you don't own. She tried one last move. We'll have our legal team review this. But even that didn't sound the same. It wasn't confident. It wasn't strong. It was fading. The surveyor didn't hesitate. They can review it all they want, he said. The property line won't change. And just like that, everything she had built in this moment, the authority, the control, the workers packed up quickly, faster than they had set up. No arguments, no complaints, no hesitation. Because once the truth is clear, there's nothing left to debate. Just minutes ago, they had been cutting with confidence, focused, efficient, certain they were doing their job. But now, everything had changed. You could see it in the way they moved. Quieter, more careful, almost like they didn't want to draw attention to themselves anymore. One of them avoided eye contact completely. Another gave me a small nod as he carried equipment back to the truck. Not an apology exactly, but an understanding. Because now they knew. They had been sent to the wrong place, given the wrong authority, pulled into something that was never theirs to be part of. The chainsaws were shut off, loaded back into the truck. The debris they had created was left behind, scattered across the ground like evidence of what had just happened. Fresh cuts, broken branches, exposed wood. A reminder that even when you stop something in time, some damage still gets done. And Karen? She didn't say a word. She stood there, exactly where she had been, for a few seconds longer than expected, completely silent. No commands, no instructions, no attempt to regain control, just stillness. It was strange to watch, because just a short time ago, she had been so certain, so composed, so confident in her authority. And now, that entire image had collapsed. There was no anger, no outburst, no denial left, just quiet. And then, without looking at anyone, without saying anything, she turned around and walked away. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what had just happened. Nothing, just a quiet exit. But the story didn't end there. Because actions like that, they don't just disappear. They don't fade away like nothing happened. They leave marks. And more importantly, they have consequences. I stood there for a while after everyone left, just looking at the trees, at the ground, at the damage, letting everything settle. Because moments like that, they don't fully hit you right away. At first, it's adrenaline, then relief, then silence, and finally, understanding. I walked along the tree line slowly, taking it all in. One tree partially cut, but still standing. Another with deep marks carved into the bark, branches scattered everywhere. And with every step, one thought kept coming back. This didn't have to happen. All of it could have been avoided. If boundaries had been respected. If authority had been understood. If someone had simply asked, instead of assumed. But that's not how it played out. Because this was never about understanding. It was about control. Over the next few days, I didn't let it go. I didn't brush it off. I didn't assume it was over. Because I knew something important. Situations like this don't end on their own. They need to be documented, handled properly, addressed fully. So I started gathering everything. Carefully, thoroughly. I took photos of the damage. From every angle, every cut, every branch, every mark left behind. I reviewed the footage I had taken that morning. The workers, the chainsaws, Karen standing there, overseeing it all. I organized the survey report, made copies, highlighted the boundaries, the exact measurements, the clear confirmation that the land was mine. Then I built a timeline, from the first letter, to the first visit, to the escalation, to the moment everything crossed the line. Every detail mattered, because details tell the full story, and the full story leaves no room for excuses. And sure enough, a few days later, a letter arrived. Same sender, same HOA, but this time, different tone. No bold statements, no demands, no threats, just careful wording. polished, measured, controlled. This appears to have been a misunderstanding. I read that line more than once. Not because I didn't understand it, but because of what it represented. A misunderstanding. That's what they chose to call it. After sending workers onto my land. After authorizing tree removal. After ignoring property lines completely. After being proven wrong. A misunderstanding. But here's the truth. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was assumption. They assumed I wouldn't push back. They assumed I wouldn't question it. They assumed I didn't know where my property ended. They assumed their authority extended further than it actually did. And most importantly, they assumed they wouldn't be challenged. That's the real pattern in situations like this. It's not about mistakes. It's about overreach. Because when people operate in systems where they're always obeyed, they start to believe those systems apply everywhere, even where they don't. And that's exactly what happened here. The HOA had control inside their boundaries, rules, standards, authority. But the moment they stepped outside those boundaries, that authority disappeared. The problem was, Karen didn't see that line. Or maybe she saw it, and chose to ignore it. Either way, the result was the same. And that's the real lesson here. Because this was never just about trees. It was about control. Control over space. Control over decisions. Control over people. And control only works when no one challenges it. The moment someone does. The moment someone stands firm. The moment someone says, no, this doesn't apply here, everything changes. Because control without authority is just assumption. And assumption falls apart under proof. In the end, the trees that were left are still standing, strong, unmoved, rooted exactly where they've always been. Some of them carry marks now, scars from that day, but they're still there. And every time I walk past them, I remember that morning. The sound of chainsaws breaking the silence. The shock of seeing strangers on my land. The confidence in Karen's voice. The certainty in her actions. And then, the shift. The moment the surveyor spoke. The moment the truth was established. The moment everything changed. Because it didn't happen slowly. It didn't fade. It collapsed. All at once. And that's the thing about situations like this. They can feel overwhelming at first. Unfair. Out of your control. But the truth? The truth doesn't need force. It doesn't need volume. It doesn't need authority. It just needs to be proven. And once it is, there's nothing left to argue. No position left to defend. No control left to hold. Just reality. Because sometimes, all it takes is proof.